So you're a week behind. Yeah, a lot of people are a week behind, and that's no problem. Just go ahead and the weeks don't have to be done sequentially. The information can be applied at any time. We started with a week of preparatory practices to increase digestive fire. And then the second week is really about reducing AMA, reducing metabolic waste, reducing gunk factor. And so if we can take a week or two and reduce gunk factor, that'll really be great. Kameo says that she really needs it. She traveled 5,000 miles in the past week and she's ready. Yes. So travel can be very amagenic. It can also be very vata aggravating, which is what we are going to talk about today. The doshas and how they relate to our physiology and how they relate to our food choices. So just go ahead if you have questions as we go through. If you're on a computer, you can post into the chat box. I'm not sure if you can do that on the phone, but you can always take yourself off mute, or there is an option to raise your hand if you have questions. So let's just bring ourselves into a sattvic, very peaceful state to begin to take in the information. So allowing your eyes to fall shut. Resting into your breath. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai, Om Shanti Shanti Shantihish, Om Guru Nama Hari Om. So welcome again. We just use a sound current, a mantra current, to begin to bring us into a sattvic state. And really the mantra that I was chanting invites us to work together as friends. So there isn't an energy of argumentation or combat in our group. We're simply sharing ideas and with great respect for each other. Because people can get very attached to their diet and their dietary choices. And so we're allowing ourselves to be a little bit looser in our identification with our diet. So today we're talking about food as medicine and creating balance through our diet. Ayurveda teaches us that there are 3 primary doshas that make up all of reality. These doshas are vata, pitta, and kapha. And the doshas are made up of the great elements. Now, the sages were not so simple as to think that we were really made up of actually the elements. Rather, they used the elements as a great metaphor for things that are in nature and in our physiology. So, vata dosha is made up of, or resembles closely, the elements of air and ether. So if you think about the qualities of air and ether, and everyone always asks, and rightly so, what is ether? Ether is the space through which sound moves. So the qualities of air and ether are very light and very dry. Likewise, vata dosha in people, in foods, in nature, in seasons, is light and dry. The primary qualities of vata dosha are rough, dry, dark, and cold. So if we apply that knowledge to food, we can see that certain foods have more qualities of vata dosha. You probably can already start to think of some things that have properties of vata dosha. Something that is light, rough, and dry, like salad, like kale, raw kale with no dressing on it, is very vata. It's very rough, it's very cold, it's light, it's very dry. Likewise, popcorn is very vata dosha. It's very light, it's very dry. Seasons are also ruled by the doshas. So fall, which is very changeable, which is another property of vata dosha, changeability, is ruled by or is carrying the qualities of vata dosha. It's very, anytime it's very windy and very dry, that will be vata dosha in the environment. Just as we can find vata in food and in seasons, we can also say that some people have more vata in their constitution than others. Someone who is very vata in their constitution will often be very thin, very dry in their skin. They'll tend to be either very enthusiastic or very anxious. So enthusiastic when in balance, anxious when out of balance. They'll tend towards constipation because the colon is ruled by vata dosha. The colon and the nervous system are ruled by vata dosha because these are places in the body that moves. Vata dosha rules everything that moves, everything that communicates, everything that transports in the body. So when we start to look at the body in systems, we know that the nervous system affects the energy of the colon. So oftentimes, someone who has either constipation or loose stools will have a correlation and have anxiety. They'll have nervous system pressure or tension. Stress, we know this. Someone who is more vata dosha, the handshake, you can tell a lot from the handshake of someone. A handshake of someone who's very vata will be their hand will feel very cold when you shake it. It will be a very kind of weak handshake, like considered a weak handshake in the West. Very light, very dry, very cold that way. So this is vata dosha. And through doing a constitutional assessment like the one that I've given you, through visual assessment and through assessment via the Vedic astrological chart and a few other things, we can tell which of these doshas is predominant in the physiology, in the mind, and then which is in balance and which is out of balance. So we'll talk about that a bit more as we go on. The next of the doshas is Pitta dosha. And Pitta dosha is made up of the qualities of fire with a little bit of water. So it's a very moist kind of tropical heat that makes up Pitta dosha. The primary qualities of Pitta dosha are intensity. Pitta dosha is very, very intense. It's hot. It's burning. It's passionate. It is responsible for transformation, for digestion, for metabolism. It is pungent, intense, hot, flowing but grounded. The Pitta body type is a medium build, a muscular build. Most people who are type A personalities will have a great deal of Pitta dosha in their constitution. They're intense. These are the CEOs oftentimes. The psychology of Pitta dosha is intense and analytical and focused. And then Pitta aggravating foods or foods that have the quality of Pitta dosha, you can imagine what they'll be. Hot, spicy, pungent foods such as chilies, ginger, anything that's burning or acidic like ginger, like vinegar or citrus, all have the quality of Pitta dosha, as does garlic. So we can start to see how we can begin to bring balance to the physiology through knowing the qualities of food and knowing the qualities of what is going on in our bodies. For example, the first thing that I will tell someone who's experiencing hot flashes or rashes is to cut out all garlic in their diet. This is because garlic, it has the qualities of heat and pungency. And by eating garlic, they're increasing heat in the body. And they are increasing specifically liver heat that is transforming into hot flashes. So simply by taking out or reducing garlic in the diet, that an imbalance of pitta dosha, of heat in the body, can be begun to be rectified. Pitta season is summer, so when it's hot, especially if it's a little humid. Pitta rules in the body the liver, the small intestine, and the skin. And then its function in the physiology is metabolism and digestion. The third dosha is kapha dosha. And kapha dosha is made up of earth and water. So it's like mud. It's very wet and very cold. It's composed of the elements of earth and water. And it has an unctuous or oily, slimy, cool, moist quality. It's very sticky, heavy, stable, strong, and soft. The kapha physiology, psychology is very easygoing, very loving, very sweet. The kapha handshake, whereas the pitta handshake is very muscular, it's very strong, it's gripping. The kapha handshake is very it's like shaking a soft pillow of a hand. Kapha body type people tend to be a larger build and tend to hold on to weight. Whereas vata dosha, people have difficulty gaining weight. Kapha dosha, people have more difficulty losing weight. Foods that have the qualities of kapha and will therefore aggravate someone with a kapha constitution are like heavy sweet foods, like cheesecakes, oilies, foods, meats that are very heavy. And the kapha season is winter and early spring, especially when it's cold and moist. Kapha dosha is found in the chest and the low back, and its function in physiology is structure, strength, immunity, and lubrication. So these are the three primary doshas. And what we need to remember is that we need to take the opposite actions to reduce the doshas. We are always trying to reduce the doshas because dosha itself means defect. So let me show, this is slightly helpful so you can see, if you can see. If not, you can watch it on the replay. So if someone has this much pitta dosha, and let's say they have this much vata dosha, excuse my scribbles, and let's say they have this much kapha dosha. So these are the proportional relationships of kapha, vata, and pitta in their physiology, okay? So this person, we would say, has a vata dosha constitution. And secondarily, they have pitta dosha. But see, kapha is very much less, so we don't say that they have much kapha in their physiology. But because of lifestyle, intensity, a lot of chilies, food mistakes over time, let's say pitta dosha has grown this much in the physiology. And they're experiencing a lot of heat in the body, hot flashes, rashes, intense irritability, things like this. We would say they have a vata constitution, but they have an imbalance of pitta. So we would want to take measures to reduce pitta in the diet and in the constitution so that they come back to this constitution of being predominantly vata. This is their natural, most aligned state. Now, even when they're in their most aligned state, because vata is the most, we would want to take measures to reduce vata. We are always reducing the, I'm on the eraser. We are always taking measures to reduce whichever dosha is highest, because we don't want any of them to get out of hand. So we're always working to reduce the doshas. So, for example, you'll see two things. So here are your course materials. And they show the three primary doshas of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And you'll see that it says nourishing. This is not because Vata dosha is nourishing. It's because Vata dosha needs nourishing. Vata is very light, very dry, all over the place, and it needs to ground and soothe to be nourished. Pitta dosha is like fire. It's very hot, so it needs to be cooled. Kapha dosha, because it's very slow, very heavy, it needs to be invigorated. And so sometimes people get confused because, for example, they see a product like this Vata tea, and they say, well, I'm very kapha, or I'm having an experience that is very kapha in my body. Should I drink Vata tea? Not exactly. These kind of products, like this kapha tea made by MAPI, or this Vata tea, they should say kapha reducing tea, Vata reducing tea. So you're always taking, if I'm quite Vata in my constitution, I should take Vata tea because I'm reducing and drawing down Vata in that way via the tea. Just like if I were very Pitta in my constitution, or if I were having a lot of heat symptoms, I should take Pitta tea to reduce those. So products like this should actually be called Vata reducing, Pitta reducing, Kapha reducing, but unfortunately they frequently are not. So yes, it is the same for body oils, precisely. I have some here, and essential oils, aromatherapies, topical oils, really anything that is labeled Vata, Pitta, or Kapha, we use the one that matches our type, our balance, or our constitution. And in that way, we're reducing that thing which is highest. We always want to reduce and keep them in check. So very good. Great question. So the key principle is knowing about the doshas and the elements, and that there are these three primary doshas that rule all of manifest reality. And we can begin to categorize things into these three primary categories. And we can adjust our diets to our dosha constitution and to any imbalance that is present. In order to do this, we need to know something about the 6 tastes and how they relate to the doshas. So Cameo had a really great question. She's mainly Vata, and does it make sense that she's craving soup and bone broth? Yes, because it is balancing, because it's very stabilizing. It's very warming, soothing, and grounding, right? Sometimes cravings are the body trying to come into balance, trying to bring the body into balance. Frequently they are. When they aren't, it's like sometimes people who are very Pitta dosha start to really crave tons of salsa, and their physiology is actually pushing the imbalance further. Cravings can tell us a lot about what is out of balance in the body and how to bring it back in balance. As we'll find out in what I'm just about to talk about, the most balancing taste for Vata dosha is the salty taste, because it contains qualities of heat and moisture. And Vata is very cold and dry. So a salt craving either can be the digestion trying to ramp itself up, or the need to ground, soothe, and balance. Now remember, Vata dosha rules the nervous system. So oftentimes there's a component of needing to ground and soothe the nervous system, especially when there's cravings for Vata type foods. Oftentimes cravings for sweet and salty are the body trying to ground the nervous system, because the nervous system, there's too much pressure in the nervous system. Things are flying all over the place and need to come back down to earth. Great questions. And if you can't go in the chat box, you can always unmute yourself or raise your hand. And I think there's an option to do that in the technology, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So I'll just go on unless there's questions now. Yeah, sweet to salty, salty to sweet is very, very calm for the nervous system trying to balance itself, for the nervous system trying to soothe and nurture, and for the digestion trying to strengthen. So let's talk about the 6 tastes and the kind of energies that they transmit to the body. Now, food cravings often occur because of imbalanced diets, because of diets that are out of balance and are only including a few food types. Meals should consist of some protein, some carbohydrate, and some vegetables. And they should contain all of the 6 tastes, which all transmit different information to our physiology. Now, it can feel overwhelming to try and cook with all 6 tastes, but there are some very, very simple ways to make sure that we get all 6 tastes into a meal. The 6 tastes are sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent. And you don't need to write these down. They're in all of your course materials. I just emailed you out a very extensive list of handouts, and those will also be posted at the website. So now, most of these you probably know what they are. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter are probably familiar to you. Sweet, though, is found in meats, breads, pastas, everything heavy, in addition to fruits, sugars, etc. Sour is in lemon, lime. Salty, mostly found in salt and in seaweeds. Bitter, we find in legumes. We find in spices like turmeric, in things like kale. Anything with that bitter taste. Pungent is the hot taste, like chilies, garlic, things like that, anything that spices up the mouth. And astringent is the drying taste. This is found in like pomegranate, grapefruit, things that make your mouth feel drier as you eat it. Clove is very astringent. Now, each of these tastes transmits different information to the physiology. Sweet is very nurturing. It's resulting from a combination of water and earth. It's very heavy, moist, and cooling. And really sugary foods in the West are mostly associated with this taste. However, it's found in all milk and milk products like butter, ghee, and cream, in grains, especially wheat and rice, in many legumes, in sweet fruits, also in cooked vegetables. The sweet taste increases bulk, moisture, and weight in the body. And so the sweet taste is excellent for building the body's vital tissues. If someone is very run down or pushing through a lot of exhaustion, they'll frequently crave the sweet taste because sweet can give them a little boost to get through the day of sugar. But really, the sweet taste doesn't have to mean anything sugary. Really, it includes anything that tastes nourishing. So sweet taste is life-giving. It builds strength and ojas because it nourishes. The first thing that we drink is either mother's milk or formula, and those both have a very sweet taste. So they communicate a great deal of nourishment to our physiology. Sweet is reducing to vata, reducing to pitta, and increasing to kapha. So you can see how someone who has a kapha constitution, which is naturally more heavy, or a kapha imbalance, will want to take less, though not none, but less sweet taste. They don't need more building. Whereas someone who is vata and tends towards depletion, tends to lose weight, will need more of the sweet, nourishing taste. The salty taste is comprised of fire and water. It's hot, heavy, and moist. So because it's composed of fire and water, and because it's hot, heavy, and moist, it is going to be very reducing to vata, which is cold and dry by nature. So the craving for the salty taste is moistening. And so while so salty taste is very grounding and balancing to vata dosha, it tends to attract water, but it also can improve the radiance of skin and promotes overall growth in the body. So the sweet taste and the salty taste are both building tastes. So if you're craving a lot of sweet and a lot of salty, it shows that something, maybe not the physiology, but something is needing grounding, building, and nourishing. The astringent taste results from the combination of air and earth. It's dry, cooling, and heavy by nature. And so it's the least common of the 6 tastes and can be found in legumes, in fruits, cranberries, pomegranates, pears, and dried fruits. And then in vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, artichoke, grains like rye, buckwheat, quinoa is very drying. And then spices and herbs, including like turmeric is very drying, marjoram, coffee, and tea are both astringent. Astringent is not as cold as the bitter taste, but it has a very cooling effect on the body, greater than the sweet taste. And so because it creates a puckering sensation in the mouth, or a dry, chalky feeling. And dry foods like crackers and chips and raw vegetables have astringent qualities. Astringent is going to aggravate vata, it's going to decrease kapha and decrease pitta. So someone who has more pitta in their constitution, or who has pitta imbalance like hot flashes, or someone who has more kapha in their constitution, or having like a lot of swelling, in their physiology that's due to kapha, water retention, will want to increase the astringent taste. Pomegranate juice, for instance, is very cooling and can be used to good effect by someone who's having a lot of hot flashes or a lot of heat sensations in the body. Similar to aloe, which is very cooling, very astringent. And the astringent taste is reducing to the body. It reduces the body. So like aloe is going to reduce heat in the body. Very, very cooling. The bitter taste increases vata, again, because it's comprised of air and ether. It's very light, cooling, and dry. It will decrease kapha and decrease pitta. It's found in dark leafy greens like spinach and kale and cabbage. Herbs and spices like turmeric and fenugreek, and dandelion root is very, very bitter. If you've ever had a cup of dandelion root tea, you know how bitter it is. And bitter taste is often not appealing on its own, but it stimulates appetite and brings out the flavor of other tastes. Bitter taste is very detoxifying. It has antibiotic, antiparasitic, and antiseptic qualities, and it's very helpful in reducing weight, water retention, skin rashes, fever, burning sensation, and nausea because it decreases pitta and kapha. Then the last of the 6 tastes is pungent, which is derived from the elements of fire and air. It's hot and dry and light, and it's the hottest of all 6 tastes, and it's found in chilies, peppers, garlic, onions, spices like black pepper, ginger, cayenne. And the pungent taste stimulates digestion. It clears out the sinuses. It promotes sweating and detoxification. It's present in many spicy foods and digestive enzymes. Pungent spices stimulate by irritating the lining of the digestive tract and the other membranes. It's made of the fire element. It's sharp and concentrated, fast-acting and intense, and it spreads out to all the tissues. It burns, penetrates, ulcerates, cuts, and cauterizes. So someone, for example, an ulcer has a great quality of pitta to it. It is an open, hot, or a canker sore inside of your mouth. It's very hot. It is open, it's oozing. So you don't want to put garlic in your mouth when you have that. That's going to increase that dosha. Instead, what do you want to do? You want to use like salt water to decrease the vata component of the canker sore, like that. So let me show you the chart so you can see how this all works out, and then I'll pause for some questions. It's a lot this week, but the more you work with it, the more you'll get a hang of these concepts. And, you know, even if you apply them 50%, it's 50% more than you were doing before. So sweet is made up of earth and water. It's cold, heavy, and moist. Sour is made, and you don't have to memorize these things. This is just for your knowledge, so you know how it works out. Sour is made up of earth and fire. It's hot, light, and moist. Salty is made of water and fire. It's hot, heavy, and moist. Bitter is made of air and space. It's cold, light, and dry. Pungent is made of fire and air. It's hot, light, and dry. And astringent is made of air and earth. It's cold, heavy, and dry. So we can use tastes to balance our doshas. The most balancing taste for vata is salty. The most aggravating taste is bitter. For pitta, the most balancing taste is bitter. The most aggravating taste is pungent because it's very hot and pitta dosha doesn't need more heat. For kapha, the most balancing taste is pungent, is actually having a lot of heat because kapha needs to get moving. The most aggravating taste is sweet because it's too building for kapha. So in this way, we can begin to use our food as medicine. And we can, without proper diet, for herbs are ineffective, and with proper diet, herbs are not necessary. We can create so much balance in the physiology by just using tastes. Like always increases like. If you're too hot, eating chilies and salsa and garlic will increase your heat. If you're cold all the time, eating raw kale will increase your cold feeling. Now, I can't tell you how many people I've seen with a clear vata dosha imbalance who are eating for breakfast like a raw kale smoothie in the blender. They're eating like raw, just tons of raw vegetables in a smoothie, iced smoothie, first thing in the morning. Now, what's that going to do? It's going to aggravate vata dosha. Let's see. Let me just pause here. Any questions or comments? If you have any, you can put them in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute and let me know if you have any questions about this information.
Hi, Justine. It's Jill.
Did you have a question, Jill?
The question I have, I do. Can you hear me okay?
All right. Well, I'll continue on then. So very simply, vata needs nourishment. Taking heavier, moisture, warmer, oilier foods with sweet, sour, and salty tastes. Pitta needs to cool down. Needs to take cooler, drier foods with with sweet, bitter, and astringent foods. Kapha needs warming and drying foods with pungent, astringent, and bitter flavor. And so then here are some examples of the different tastes and where we can find the foods. Sweet, sugar, fruit, meat, breads, carbs. Sour, grapefruit, yogurt, lemons, vinegar. Salty, salt, olives, cheeses, prepared foods, soy salt, miso, chips. Bitter, coffee, dark chocolate, greens, arugula. Astringent, drying beans, pomegranate, honey. And then pungent, ginger, and chilies. So the simple approach is that Vata needs more milk, ghee, pasta, cottage cheese, and needs to avoid taking salads, crackers, and cold drinks. Pitta needs like cilantro chutneys, zucchini, pomegranate juice, and needs to avoid citrus, garlics, onions, tomatoes, and peppers. Kapha needs greens, beans, and ginger, and needs to avoid dairy, sugar, and reduce meats. So these, I've given you a huge amount of recipes this week. For each of the doshas, I've given you a whole compilation of recipes. So Jill has a question. Can you talk about time of day and how it impacts digestion? Should you avoid some flavors at certain times of day? You know, Jill, not so much. You don't have to avoid some flavors at certain times of day. Mostly just eating for either your imbalance or your constitution or a mix of both will be the best thing. Now, impacting digestion, just eating when you're hungry and not eating when you're not hungry is the best way to eat throughout the time of day. If you aren't hungry in the morning, don't eat. You don't need to eat breakfast if you aren't hungry. And there's not really a need to avoid some flavors at certain times of day. That said, through the night, your digestion is weaker than at the middle of the day. So doing something like taking a big bowl of ice cream at night, what are the qualities of ice cream? Everyone should know now. What dosha is ice cream? I just said it. Ice cream is very kapha dosha. It's wet, it's cold, it's heavy, it's moist, right? So that's going to be heavier and hard to digest. And so while you're sleeping through the night, the body is not active. And so you're going to have a very hard time digesting ice cream through the night. And what happens when you don't digest? You develop ama. And ama is gunk factor and it makes us sick. So we want to avoid something very heavy, very sweet right before bed, for example. Making lunch the biggest meal of the day and warm is very important, but the rest, we don't have to take certain tastes at certain times of day. We're just trying to get all 6 tastes in to our diet and then highlighting the flavors which are most important for our physiology. So if I were Pitta dosha, I'd want to have all 6 flavors represented, but I'd want to take much less of the pungent flavor. Much less heat like that. And you'll see in the handouts that I've given you recipes for all 3 doshas, big compilations of recipes from many sources. I've also given you shopping lists for each dosha of which spices are best to buy, which vegetables are best to buy, like that. And then I've also given you a format to make meal plans for the week and shopping lists for the week, or more than 1 week, should you like. So you have tons of information. I've also given you a 1 sheet on a diet on dietary guidelines, we should say, because nothing is hard and fixed. Dietary guidelines for Vata, dietary guidelines for Pitta, and dietary guidelines for Kapha. So good question. So improving digestion is as important as taking the perfect diet. Improving digestion is as important as taking the perfect diet. It becomes very difficult to always be avoiding or highlighting different things, but if we can just increase digestion and then work with these broad tastes, it will go so far to bring us into more balance. So let's take a couple of examples of how we can begin to use this knowledge to bring balance to our physiology. So if we have a Vata imbalance with a Kapha constitution, which would mean we have a heavier constitution, but we're very cold, we're very nervous, we're experiencing anxiety, Then we would want lighter grains, less oil, less heavy dairy and protein, but still the warm foods with vata pacifying vegetables and grains and some hotter spices because we're trying to pacify vata. If we have a vata imbalance with a pitta constitution, we want warm, nourishing, but only slightly oily foods with slightly cooler spices. Avoiding chilies because of the pitta constitution. We don't want to heat up too much. Avoid cayenne, black pepper, dried ginger, hing, which is asafoetida, it's very heating, and garlic. And we want to avoid nightshades because nightshades are very pitta aggravating. And when you go through the dietary guidelines, the recipes, this will make even more sense. And then a pitta constitution with no imbalance, we want to take cooling foods. Just avoid chilies, cayenne, garlic, black pepper, and use cooling spices such as cilantro. Avoiding nightshades and hard cheeses, which are very aggravating to pitta. Now, the next knowledge that I want to share with you is very simple, and that is that there are different effects of different nutritional categories on our physiology. What this means is that we don't have to be overly concerned about whether I should eat strawberries versus oranges. People ask me these questions all the time. Well, somebody said this recently. I read about a kapha diet and it says I shouldn't take avocado. Well, yeah, why is it saying you shouldn't take avocado? Avocado is heavy and cold, but vegetables and fruits have very, very, very little impact on the physiology. The number one thing which has the highest impact on our physiology is the spices that we are taking. Even more than herbs, spices have a huge impact on our physiology. So if we can do nothing but get the spices right for us, we will create so much balance. Animal products create, like dairy, meats, create a lot of impact on the physiology. So we want to be careful about what dairy and what meat we are taking. When we look at the lists of food for our constitution, we should veer towards get the right animal products, get the right spices. Oils have a less impact, sweeteners even less, nuts and seeds even less, then legumes, then vegetables, then fruits, then grains. So it's very difficult to create an imbalance with vegetables, with fruits, or with grains. It is very easy to create an imbalance using a lot of garlic, using spices that are not correct for our own physiology. So we can begin to play with these things throughout the food that we take. So I've given you a great deal of materials this week to read through, to start to go through, to start working with different recipes and shopping lists. So I recommend that if you haven't done the constitutional assessment, go ahead and do it. And then think to yourself, well, this is my constitution, but is there an imbalance that I am having? And if it is an imbalance, what does it fall along the lines of? Am I too hot? Am I too cold? Am I retaining weight? Then you want to mitigate using that secondary factor so that you're looking at imbalance, you're looking at constitution, and you can begin to create balance in your physiology. Food is key in creating balance in the physiology. It has more than just a biochemical value. It contains qualities. It conveys qualities to the body. Light foods lighten the body. Heavier foods make the body heavy. Spicy foods add flame to the body. In excess, they inflame the body. So for example, tomatoes are very heating. They're nightshades. And we know that eating a lot of nightshades creates inflammation in the body. Cold foods cool the digestion and make the digestion run cool. That is, not burn effectively. Dry foods dry out the body. But the subtle qualities of food are really lost on so many of us. And we need to develop more of an awareness of the qualities of the foods. And so we can use the foods as a medication. For example, say you have a pimple on your face, or say you have a lot of acne, the common Western remedy for acne is antibiotics. What do antibiotics do? Has anyone ever like tasted an antibiotic in their mouth? It's incredibly, incredibly bitter. It's communicating a bitter, decreasing quality to the body, because bitter decreases hot, heat, and moisture, which is the eruptions on the skin of the face. Now, we can do the same thing with foods. By increasing bitter in the diet, we'll see a reduction, and by increasing the digestive fire, usually there's a digestive fire component of acne, we'll see a reduction of eruptions on the skin. So in this way, we can use the very simple qualities of foods to create so much change in the physiology. So this is a lot today. I really recommend that you download, I've sent them to the email, the recipes, the shopping list, and the diet for your constitution. If you know what that is, if you're a little confused, you can send me an email. I'm happy to respond to it. And start playing with these things. Really, your body is yours to experiment with. And so the best way to start working with these tastes is start to experiment with the 6 different tastes and see how they make you feel, what is being communicated to the physiology in a very deep way. Very good. Any questions about all of this? Or any more questions? Is anyone confused about which direction to go? Yeah, so indigestion is usually because of weakness of digestion, which has been, so the question was, what about indigestion? 2 things happen here. Digestion has grown weak. We need to use all of the suggestions from week 1 to increase the digestive fire. It is also an imbalance. Oftentimes it's vata affecting the stomach. Really, where we don't want vata to be, it's gone into the stomach. The stomach is ruled by pitta. We don't want vata there. And oftentimes it has come about by long-term taking of cold, dry foods. Will create a lot of indigestion, gas, pain, and bloating. And oftentimes that we can use spices, especially fennel, because fennel is warming and soothing, to decrease indigestion. We always say fennel is your friend. Using fennel tea, chewing fennel after meals will really help with indigestion, bloating, gas, and pain. We can also use from week 2, I gave a spice water recipe of cumin, coriander, and fennel seeds that can be drunk in hot water throughout the day to begin to increase the digestive fire and to reduce gas and pain, bloating, indigestion. But indigestion is a sign that something is out of balance. Really, anytime the physiology isn't feeling 100% good, there is a sign that we have veered out of balance for our constitution, then we want to begin to take measures to rein that imbalance back in. We know this. If you have a lot of congestion in your nose and in your throat, if you drink a lot of milk or eat a lot of ice cream, which is very cold, very phlegmy, you're going to increase those symptoms, especially if the milk isn't spiced and boiled. Or eating ice cream is actually, when I lived in India, you know, if we ever went out to ice cream, like everybody would always say, you shouldn't take that. You're going to get a sore throat. You're going to get a cold right away. Like there's a belief that there's a correspondence, which oftentimes we found that in that hot weather, we would get a sore throat or a cold like right away. But so like increases like. If there's digestion, indigestion, gas, pain, bloating, we need to do something to soothe the digestion. Yeah, and if you're getting a lot of mucus with dairy, I gave you a handout written by my teacher, Dr. Paul Douglas, where he goes through a lot of common myths about taking milk. We find that if milk is boiled and then spiced, it won't be as mucus forming, and it will actually transmit a lot of good ojas to the physiology. Most people get a lot of mucus by taking milk, not because they're actually allergic to it, but because it hasn't been prepared correctly. And if it's cold dairy, you're going to get mucus. It's just pretty much indigestible. So using the spice water, using fennel, using warm digestible foods and increasing digestive fire, like using ginger pickle, using the raw chutneys before you eat, will decrease indigestion. Someone in the class had said that, oftentimes if they take mung dal and mung beans, beans themselves are drying, they're vata aggravating, so they can cause indigestion. Bloating, gas is air and ether. Well, that's what gas is. It's spacious, right? So that's a lot of vata. We want to decrease vata. Beans, frequently people who are more vata feel like they can't take beans because it creates a great deal of gas. But however, if we add some warming spices and some oils in and eat some chutneys beforehand, we can take the beans just fine because we've increased the digestive fire. We always need to be, digestion is as important, if not more important, than getting the perfect foods in. So you have a lot of recipes to look at for this week. You have a lot of handouts on different dietary strategies. I gave you a handout that my teacher made going through myths about the so-called paleo diet, about milk, about raw foods, and I think that you'll find those interesting. I really recommend you download the recipes for the dosha that you're working with, the meal plan for the week, the shopping list, and go ahead and start to play with making some of the recipes for your type, for your body, and see how things feel for you when you do so. So these are the main 2 points for the week, is learning about the doshas, learning about the 6 tastes, and then learning about the relative categories of food, that we can create a lot of imbalance with spices, but something like fruits, vegetables, grains, it's more difficult to create imbalance using them. Great. Any last questions from anyone? You can put it in the chat or take yourself off mute. All right, very good. Feel free to send me any questions that you have and have fun playing with the recipes this week. Take care, everyone. Much love. Namaste.